Hi guys, what's up? Hope you're doing well. So, I'm pleased to share some of my ideas about Olympic movement, IOC, Olympic Games, and Lex Olympica. The general theme for today's conversation is IOC legal status. I insist that learning different approaches to sport regulation will help you get the right skills to succeed and lead change in an ever more connected world. I want my students and subscribers to be globally aware, skilled, and prepared for the future challenges, especially in the sphere of international sports system. So now, I will guide you through my new course, Lex Olympica. It covers legal review of the Olympic ecosystem, including the IOC status, Olympic Games management, and some practical problems of Olympic violations, arbitrage, codification. Just a few days now until the mega event of 2024 in the field of sports, the Olympics in Paris. So it's high time to terminate the lack of knowledge about the Olympic movement. So I figured 4 items, and the first item is to analyze the history of the Olympics. Uh, First of all, the Olympic Games in antiquity. The Olympic Games, as we know them today, have a long history which goes back to ancient times. Although some elements of these games were revived as they were when the modern Olympic Games were created, others were removed or modified. Everything started in the Peloponnese in Greece, some 3,000 years ago. Sports competitions were organized at Olympia and were named after their location, hence their name of Olympic Games. Nobody knows exactly when they began, but the first written mention of them dates back to 776 BC. It's difficult to know what gave rise to the ancient games. Numerous versions attempt to explain them. Historically, the games were created to provide unity to the Hellenic world, which at that time was split into city-states which were constantly at war. Mythology is mixed up with history, and the events that happened during the period were often explained as being the consequence of divine intervention. These games were held every 4 years. This 4-year period acquired the name Olympiad and was used as a date system. Time was counted in Olympiads rather than years. So you can mention the Panhellenic Games. The games organized at Olympia led to the development of Panhellenic Games. These included the games at Olympia, Olympic Games, every 4 years, the games at Delphi, Pitta Games, every 4 years, third year of each Olympiad, then the games at the Isthmus of Corinth, every 2 years, second and fourth year of each Olympiad, and the games at Nemea, every 2 years, second and fourth year of each Olympiad. These games were special because they brought the Greek world together. Pan means all, and Hellen means Greek. At a time when Greece was not a single state, but a series of city-states, politically and economically independent communities. From Greece and the colonies in Italy, North Africa, and Asia Minor, people traveled to take part in or attend these games, inspired by the shared feeling of belonging to the same culture or religion. The 4 Panhellenic Games were never held during the same year. On the occasion of the 4 Panhellenic Games, a sacred truce, Ekeheria, was proclaimed. Messengers went from city to city announcing the date of the competitions. They called for all walls to be halted before, during, and after the games in order to enable the athletes, as well as the spectators, to travel to or from the games sites in total safety. A climate of peace was considered important during the period of competition. The Panhellenic Games were of major religious significance. Each of the games was celebrated in honor of a specific god: Zeus, the king of gods at Olympia and Nemea; Apollo, the god of light and reason at Delphi; and Poseidon, the god of the sea and horses at Isthmus of Corinth. Other festivals, in addition to the Olympic Games, major sports competitions were held in Athens. These were known as the Panathenaic Games. They were part of the Great Panathenaic, the biggest festival in Athens, which was held every 4 years in honor of the goddess Athena. Everywhere in Greece and the colonies there were numerous local competitions, some better known than others. Each city made a point of organizing them. The status of the Panhellenic Games and the large number of local competitions illustrate the importance of physical exercise and the spirit of competition in ancient Greek society. When looking at a sculpture or a scene painted on a vase, it's easy to identify the athlete by his nakedness. Indeed, for both training and competitions, athletes were always nude to illustrate the idea of harmony between the body and the mind. According to this ideal, it was only through training the body that the mind could be developed. There was a gymnasium and a palestra in every Greek city. These places were where athletes trained and young boys were educated. It was an all-round education, included exercise for the body as well as the mind. Physical education, music, arithmetic, grammar, and reading were all part of the program. There were three main criteria for participation in the games. One had to be male, of Greek origin, and a free man. Male, Greek origin, free man. The Olympic Games were celebrated for over 1,000 years and underwent many changes. At their peak, they lasted for 5 days, and the sporting contests were a central element. First day, the athletes, as well as the judges, took an oath to respect the rules. Contests for trumpet players and heralds followed this ceremony, the winners of which had the honor of making the announcements during the games. After the sounding of the trumpet, the name of the event, the arrival of the competitors, and the names of the winners were announced loudly by these veritable speakers of the era. Second day, the equestrian events took place in the hippodrome. The most popular event was the four-horse chariot race. There were also chariot races for young horses and a mounted horse race. It must be noted that the winners were not the jockeys or the charioteers, but rather the owners of the horses. This is how Kiniska of Sparta, owner of a stable of horses, became an Olympic champion. The pentathlon took place in the stadium in the afternoon. It consisted of 5 events: discus, long jump, javelin, running, and wrestling. Third day. This day was considered to be the culminating point of the game. A great sacrifice took place. 100 cows were killed in honor of Zeus and other divinities. The meat was shared amongst the community of games participants during a feast to which all were invited. Fourth day, the foot races took place at the stadium. There were several types of race: the stadium race, the Dallas, the Delicious, the race of arms. For boxing, the contests' hands were protected by long leather thorns. Wrestlers were standing up with bare hands. But creation was a type of wrestling. All moves were allowed except for biting, gouging out eyes, and putting fingers in the opponent's nose. Fifth and the last day, this day was reserved for honoring victorious athletes. They were covered in ribbons and received victory crowns in the stadium before a solemn ceremony in which they were crowned with olive wreaths. Finally, a banquet was given for them, together with the politicians and judges. At the modern Olympic Games, the first, second, and third places athletes are rewarded respectively by gold, silver, and bronze medals. At the Pan Games, there was only one winner, whose prize was a wreath or crown of leaves. At each of the venues, the crowns were made with different types of leaves. At Olympia, it was a wild olive leaf crown. At Delphi, a laurel crown. At Corinth, pine crown. At Nemea, a wild celery crown. Although winners did not receive any financial reward, Olympic champions became important figures in their own town or city, where they often took on a political role. The glory of the victorious athlete brought reflected glory to all the inhabitants of his own town. When he returned from the Greece of the games, he was given a hero's welcome and received numerous benefits for the rest of his life. To show that he had become famous, the victor had the right to have a statue of himself erected. He could also ask a poet to write verses telling his feats. Because they were proud of him, his fellow citizens sometimes made coins with his effigy on them so as not to forget him and to make him known throughout the Greek world. For 1,000 years, the Greeks and later the Romans met at Olympia to celebrate the festival in honor of Zeus and ensure that the games remained as an important event. We now know that games were still being organized in the 4th century AD. In 393 AD, the Christian emperor Theodosius forbade the celebration of pagan cults, which included the games. Nonetheless, the popularity of sports, contests, and cultural festivals continued in many Greek-influenced provinces of the Roman Empire as late as the 6th century AD. Following Theodosius' decree, pagan cults began to disappear gradually and the city of Olympia was abandoned. Earthquakes destroyed the edifices and their ruins disappeared gradually under the earth and sand. There are no longer any visible traces of the site. Thanks to the writings of ancient historians, the memory of the games and their place in the Greek world wasn't totally forgotten. The games were known to have existed, but the knowledge of their exact location had been lost. In 1776, the English traveler Richard Chandler discovered the site of ancient Olympia. The principal research digs were carried out 100 years later by German archaeologists. Today, archaeological digs have allowed us to discover the past glory of the Pan Games and the significance of Olympia. So this was the brief historical review of antiquity. Then the modern Olympic Games. So The games are held every 4 years, just like they were held at the ancient times. Now we have Olympic movement, we have several elements of its ecosystem, but how it all began. The Olympic Games include the game of the Olympiad, that means the Summer Games, and the Olympic Winter Games. The first edition of the modern Summer Games was held in 1896 in Athens, Greece, and the first Olympic Winter Games in 1924 in Chamonix, France. So I guess it's 100 years later, we'll have the Summer Games in Paris, in France. The word Olympiad designates the 4-year period that separates each edition of the Summer Games. Until 1992, the Summer and Winter Games were held in the same year, but since then, the Winter Games were moved 2 years from the Summer Games. The Summer and Winter Games continue to be organized once every 4 years. So it was Pierre de Coubertin of France who dreamed up this ambitious project, although others before him had tried to revive these games. Drawing inspiration from the ancient Olympic Games, he decided to create the modern Olympic Games. With this purpose, he founded the International Olympic Committee, IOC, in 1894 in Paris. The new committee set itself the objective of organizing the first Olympic Games of modern times. The date of the first Games, 1896, marked the beginning of an extraordinary adventure that has now lasted for over a century. The roots of the Olympic Games are to be found in ancient Greece, and the first modern Games in 1896 featured many references to this legacy of Greek antiquity. For example, the Games were held in Athens in Greece, the country where the ancient Games were held. Then most of the competitions were held in an ancient stadium, which had been restored for the occasion. Then most of the sports of the program of the ancient Games were included in the first modern Games. And the organizers invented a race inspired by an event in antiquity, the marathon. Generally speaking, the modern Games strive towards a more peaceful world. The Olympic truce calling for a halt to all conflicts recalls the concept of the truce observed during the ancient Games. Innovations. While the modern Games draw their inspiration from the past, they are also quite different. From the outset, Coubertin proposed secular games. The modern Games are secular, unlike the ancient Games, which were dedicated to the gods. Then, games around the globe. In contrast with the Olympic Games of antiquity, each edition of the modern Games takes place in principle in a different city or country. Then, longer games. In ancient times, the games were held first on one day, finally over 5 days, as we mentioned before. Today, the official duration is no more than 16 days. The ancient Olympic Games were the preserve of free male Greek citizens, whereas the modern Games have always been open to athletes from all over the world. Then we have some rituals of the opening and closing ceremonies. Just in 6 days, we'll see the opening of the games, and we'll take into account that, for example, the speech by the IOC president is a must, or the Olympic anthem is a must, something else. So you can additionally seen, and closing of the Games, handing over the Olympic flag to the next Olympic host city, gathering of the athletes in the stadium, the declaration of the closing of the Games by the IOC president, and so on. As for sport, art, and culture, they all exist, and we have plenty of innovations. For example, what is sport? It is a set of disciplines or events. What is art? Mascots and some other examples. What is culture? Cultural program, cultural diplomacy. So, what about victory? The moment of victory is symbolized by the athlete stepping onto the podium to receive his or her medal. But the ceremony has not always existed. The various elements of the ceremony in Olympic history at different times. For example, gold, silver, and bronze medals were not awarded until 1904. Then I've mentioned the cultural diplomacy. The diplomatic role of the Games is rather important. If the Games are used for political ends, the Olympic ideal is placed under threat. Nevertheless, the Olympic Games can be used to improve relations between countries and communities. I think we can make a bit of pause on this first item, and maybe we'll come back to it in my course. Today, I only make a brief version. The second item, I mentioned 4 items, just as far as you remember, I guess. The second item covers legal acts of Olympic movement, and I'll try to be brief. So, what I suggest to make, so to say, 4 steps of legal acts, including legally binding acts, and those acts which we call lex sportiva. First step, rule of law. Everybody knows the initiative of United Nations. So rule of law is a unique initiative and the, so to say, pattern to all legal acts, including Olympics, including sports. So I can mention 3 legal acts from the point of rule of law. UN General Assembly Resolution 64/3, observer status for the IOC in the General Assembly. Then agreement between the Swiss Federal Council and the IOC on the status of the IOC in Switzerland. And Nairobi Treaty on the protection of the Olympic symbol. Then I can mention, by the way, Nairobi Treaty is, so to say, the act of copyright, the act combined both by IOC and World Intellectual Property Organization. So it can be mentioned as the second edition of legally binding acts. The third step is, so to say, lex sportiva. Olympic Charter, IOC Code of Conduct, IOC Code of Ethics. You know, the phrase, let it be fair play. So this exactly the Lex Sportiva Acts I mentioned, the Olympic Charter again, IOC Code of Conduct, and IOC Code of Ethics. And the fourth step, I think I could use the phrase play true. Olympic Movement Code on the Prevention of the Manipulation of Competitions, and Olympic Movement Medical Code. So two acts, they're not legally binding, but they should be mentioned in the sphere of Lex Olympics, the Lex Olympica. From the official glance, there are many other IOC documents, which you can find on the official website of the IOC, and they will form Lex Olympica. So I recommend to contact me and ask for some additional guide. Then, item number 3 presumes that I will guide you through the Olympics ecosystem. So here we go. So the brainchild of Frenchman Pierre de Coubertin, the International Olympic Committee, IOC, and the Olympic movement were officially established on 23rd June 23, 1894, at the Paris International Congress that was organized by Coubertin at the Sorbonne. Coubertin's vision for the Olympic Games may be summarized as follows. Why did I restore the Olympic Games? To ennoble and strengthen sports, to ensure their independence and duration, and this thus to enable them better to fulfill the educational role incumbent upon them in the modern world. Coubertin is also the author of the famous phrase which characterizes the Olympic Games. The important thing in life is not the triumph, but the fight. The essential thing is not to have won, but to have fought well. He said this in 1908. What can we consider to be elements of the Olympic ecosystem, or Olympics ecosystem? First of all, the Olympic movement. The goal of the Olympic movement is clearly defined in the Olympic Charter. The goal of the Olympic movement is to contribute to building a peaceful and better world by educating youth through sport, practice in accordance with Olympism and its values. The Olympic movement is the concerted, organized, universal, and permanent action carried out under the supreme authority of the IOC of all individuals and entities who are inspired by the values of Olympism. It covers the 5 continents. It reaches its peak with the bringing together of the world's athletes at the great sports festival, the Olympic Games. In addition to the IOC, the Olympic movement therefore includes the international sports federations, the national Olympic committees, the organizing committees for the Olympic Games, all other recognized federations, institutions, and organizations, as well as athletes, judges, referees, coaches, and other sports technicians. The second element, the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, is the supreme authority of the Olympic movement. It acts as a catalyst for collaboration between all parties of the Olympic family, including the NOCs, the international federations, the athletes, the organizing committees, the Olympic partner program sponsors, and broadcast partners. It also fosters cooperation with public and private authorities, in particular the United Nations, national governments, and supranational organizations. The IOC members are volunteers and represent the IOC and the Olympic movement in their country. They are not delegates of their country within the IOC. They include active and former Olympic athletes, as well as presidents or senior leaders of international federations, NOCs, and other international organizations recognized by IOC. Then the IOC Executive Board has the general responsibility for the administration and management of the IOC's affairs. The IOC presidents, the IOC session, the IOC commissions. They're also part of IOC, and IOC as the element of Olympics ecosystem. The third element, I guess, the international sport federations. The fourth element is the National Olympic Committees. And the fifth element, I guess, the organizing committees for the Olympic Games. Supplementary are for sure the Olympic partners, and all other recognized actors in the Olympic from the Olympic world. But again, I can say that we should save our time today and make a pause and then continue during the big course that I will, of course, represent. So the fourth, last but not least, I guess, is item 4. Olympic Games, Paris 2024. From the legal point of view, I present some crucial documents. So what we have, the willingness and readiness of Paris, which is on the final straight as the games, just today, maybe tomorrow. We have some specific features of these games, for example, individual neutral athletes, special committee, and documents. For example, official program of the Olympic Games Paris 2024, which include the schedule and all the dates, all the information, all the athletes, everything. Then we have some principles from qualifications, including principles and criteria for every event. Then we have some accreditation documents. For example, some settled terms and conditions for accreditation. Then, of course, we have anti-doping and medical rules, especially for the events and especially for the whole, anti-doping rules at 2024 events. We have IOC legal policy regarding certain not scientific and medical equipment for the games. Then we have media guidelines and access rules. We have also IOC social and digital media guidelines. We have guidelines regarding authorized identifications. Then photographers undertaking, some rules. We have, of course, lawyers will understand host city contracts and other contracts just around the, so to say, official attitude towards the games, including host city election procedure documents. And we have also fact sheets in comparison with Paris 100 years ago and Paris 19, including Paris 1900 and Paris 1924, and actual events including Paris 2024. So I guess this is the brief version of my big course, which I call Lex Sportiva, including several topics, for example, IOC Legal Status or Olympic movement management, and so on. It seems to me I mentioned plenty of points. Some you did know, but some you might not. So, what can I say? Subscribe to my channel, follow me on Instagram and Telegram. Thanks for your attention, and still enjoy this weekend. Bye-bye.